Hey, my name is Chelsea Fagan, and I'm the founder and CEO of The Financial Diet, a totally independently owned and operated company of women who love to talk about money. Welcome to The Financial Confessions, a weekly show where we talk to people about their personal finances, their professional industry, and how money shapes their lives. You can listen to or watch new episodes of The Financial Confessions every week on YouTube or your preferred streaming platform. You can also support TFD and get exclusive access to our entire catalog of ad-free bonus videos, workshops, Discord community, our book club, and more by joining our members-only community on Patreon or YouTube. Our 2024 goal is to be primarily supported by our incredible community, and joining our membership program is the best way to do that. Enjoy the episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Financial Confessions for the second installment of our current little ongoing series all about the wedding industrial complex. For many of us, it is wedding season, and for many of us, it also might just be the wedding season of our lives, where not only having potentially our own wedding, but attending other people's weddings has a very serious impact on our budget. Last week, we spoke with a woman who went into 5 figures of credit card debt to attend weddings and to be a bridesmaid. We'll link you in the description to that if you haven't watched it yet. But I also wanted to speak to someone who has been on the bridal side of navigating this objectively financially chaotic time in our lives. One thing that cannot be overstated when it comes to wedding culture is just how much all of this stuff, from the outfits you wear to the destinations you plan, to the elaborate bridal parties, to the photo booths, to the cake, are very much targeted at women. Especially in heterosexual couples, it is usually the woman who is by far receiving the vast majority of the marketing and the messaging, both explicit and implicit, that this is the most important day of her life. Combine that with family and social pressure, as well as the fact that now most of this is playing out on social media, where it used to just be visible to the actual guests, and it is a recipe for even otherwise very financially savvy and confident women to make decisions that they later regret. When I put out a call on social media for people who had fallen victim to the wedding industrial complex, my guest today reached out to share that she spent, we'll let her reveal the number, but that ultimately, even though it was lower than some people's wedding budgets, she regrets the money that she spent and wished that she had eloped. Ultimately, only you can ever determine what are the right and wrong things to spend on when it comes to what is actually worth it to you. But I do think that especially in the lead up to planning a wedding, it's very important to listen to people who themselves went through the process, spent a lot of money, and looking back with clear eyes would have done it very differently, because what feels like a must-have in the moment often reveals itself pretty quickly after the fact to have totally been a nice-to-have, and in some cases, a regret to have. Without further ado, I would like to welcome my guest today, former bride who wished she had eloped, Liz.
Hi.
Hi, Liz. First of all, welcome to the Financial Confessions.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to chat.
Yes, so let's just start by talking numbers. Let's talk about what you spent on your wedding, when it happened, and just a little bit of a breakdown of where that money went.
Yeah. So to start, I got married in 2019, so it's almost been 5 years since it's passed. And I did kind of break down the numbers going back. Some things are ballpark, some things I have receipts still. So in total, my partner and myself spent $29,000 on the total wedding. And breakdown wise, that looks like, to start, we were actually really lucky and we had a free venue, which came to us in the way of a family friend's house. They had a lot of parties there. It was a big house. We were able to utilize it, but there was still a lot of other costs for that. So going into vendors, we spent 21,000 on vendors, and that included, we needed to rent an outdoor porta potty and different furniture. So for the tables, the linens, chairs, greenery, florist, photographer, we had a videographer, then like hairstylists and bartending, insurance for the venue so that they could be covered since it was just a normal home. And then like stationery for invites, all of that went into kind of what I called vendors. And one thing that we were able to save a little bit of money on was actually food. We spent 1,500 on that, but that was also because our family helped us. So we ended up kind of going to Costco and buying a ton of the food and then creating it ourselves, and hiring out some people to help with preparing the food and serving it. But that was definitely one part that we saved on. And then decor was kind of again like a combination of um, a lot of DIY. So I created a lot of the signage. I have an art background, so really had a lot of all hands on deck, even when it came to photography. My friend helped, but I still paid her services because she's worth it. But one bit where I didn't pay for was I let her stay at our apartment instead of like how you would typically fund if you brought in someone out of town, um, their hotel costs. And looking through my list, part of the funds as well was clothes. So my dress was $1,500, 500 to tailor, even though actually the dress that I did was meant to be kind of custom. There used to be a service um, in San Francisco, which is where we got married. I just realized I didn't mention that. So we got married in the Bay Area in San Francisco, and there was a service at the time called Anomaly. It was a startup where you could design your own wedding dress, but I still needed alterations for that. And my partner's clothes as well. So we did a suit and then our wedding rings. So we spent about 2 grand on that.
Despite having a DIY wedding for a lot of it and having the venue comped, you still spent $30,000 essentially.
Yes,
How many guests?
80 guests.
Wow, that's a very high price per guest.
Yes.
When you got married, and I want to acknowledge that, your partner has transitioned since, which obviously does have an impact on, things like looking back at wedding photos and things like that. But at the time, this was an outwardly presenting hetero marriage, where a lot of the costs, as I mentioned in the intro, were either kind of geared toward the bride, kind of targeting the bride in terms of marketing, or actually related to the bride in terms of things like your dress, the tailoring, etc. Did you feel like when you were going through the wedding planning process that you were kind of leading a lot of the purchasing decisions?
I felt like I was leading a lot as far as the taste and kind of the goals, but we didn't. I would actually say with my partner, I felt like they had a lot more say when it came to how we would do things, and specifically a lot of the guests were actually their family, and they're from the Bay Area where we had the wedding, and mine weren't. And so it kind of was a combination of like I was leading certain aesthetic tastes, but they were leading certain kind of like goals for serving the family and like what it would look like to show up with the friends and family.
I'm always interested in terms of, the inertia of things. And I know you mentioned in your email that a lot of the spiraling costs was due to having to grow the guest list and invite a lot more people than maybe you had initially intended. Do you feel like, because obviously you regret a lot of that spending now, but do you feel like at the time when you were actually going through it, that you had a sense that you were like, ooh, I really don't want to spend this money, but I guess I have to? Or do you feel like you were kind of in the inertia of it and it was all being like, okay, well, we'll buy this, we'll buy that. And it wasn't until after the wedding was over that you look back at the budget and you were like, damn, we should not have done that?
It was both during and after. So when we were setting out, we had a long engagement. We were engaged for a year and a half before we got married. And I remember talking about cost of, okay, like we wanted to not go above 15,000. We almost doubled that at the end, which is wild to look back at and like realize, wow, things did just kind of keep escalating. And then we got to a certain point where we felt like, okay, well, we're already this far in. We want to do it because we said we're going to do it, but also it would be really nice if we could just go and elope and like not do such a grand like party where a lot of it honestly, like looking back, was definitely this pressure to like be the wedding that everyone expected. A lot of our friends were getting married at the time, all were very heteronormative, but also we lived in a very expensive city where people did go hard and go big. And like I knew people spending 2 to 3 times the amount that we ended up spending, despite it being more DIY. And even when we were beginning and trying to get quotes, it was so much more than I expected. So when we did the outset of, okay, we could do it more DIY, we really didn't think it was going to be as much money as we ended up spending. And some of those things were like, did we need a videographer? Probably not. In addition to a photographer, did we need these extra things? But honestly, like I think a lot of the issue when you do DIY is like not expecting all these extra costs, like renting a porta potty, renting furniture, renting like cookware that can serve 80 people. Um, yeah, it definitely escalated and got to a point where it felt like it was a little too late to turn back.
Well, that's the inertia. I mean, so much of what the wedding industrial complex, I feel, is really the sunk cost fallacy of like, well, we've already done this much, so what's an extra X or Y on top of the amount that we're already spending that is objectively kind of unjustifiable? I think the other thing you had mentioned in your email that, because your partner transitioned since the wedding, that in some ways it is a snapshot of your life that is not reflective of who you are as people now. And I think that's obviously a more notable example, but I think that's actually true for everyone, that ultimately your wedding is just a snapshot of your life. And you would often be surprised 5, 10 years down the road or more how different things are, the way your priorities change, the people in your life might change. In terms of, what you would kind of do differently at the place you are now in your life versus then, if you were to get married today, do you feel like would have a more clear sense of what you would want the snapshot to be now?
I definitely do. And yeah, I also want to like call out and appreciate that because my partner's transitioned, it does feel very stark, but I totally agree. I think you grow a lot in time. Like 5 years later, we are very different people, um, regardless of that. And so now I'm in my early 30s, and I do feel like I have a pretty strong view of what I would want to look at if I was looking at a snapshot and like also what's meaningful. And I think one thing I've learned is I really like hosting and I really like just having people hang out in a very casual way. And so I think I would want something like that. If I were to totally get remarried, I would probably go and pick a really beautiful local place to just like go say vows, do the like sweet ceremony between the two of us, and then come back and just have people hang out in our like at our house and have a party with pizza and just chill and have fun.
And you mentioned, which by the way, that sounds amazing. And maybe honestly, you guys should do that. So have another wedding as who you guys are. And I think there's always an occasion for that. And I always like to remind people, it's like, let's be clear, you can go absolutely as ham as you want for your 10th anniversary party. There's always an opportunity to celebrate and to create these new moments and to do things the way you would want to do them now. You had mentioned in your email that there was just a lot of stress, a lot of high emotion, kind of drama leading up to the wedding. And I think for a lot of people, part of what makes this such a complicated moment financially is that feeling of pressure, often from family, maybe from friends, and a real difficulty with setting boundaries and saying no. And that was a common theme in a lot of the emails that I received when I put out the call. Can you talk a little bit about kind of your emotions and your ability to navigate those boundaries at the time, and kind of what you learned and how you would do it differently now?
Mm, yes. As I was reflecting to prepare for this call, I would even say emotionally and the stress that went into interfamilial relationships and how it comes to money, I regret it more for that than I do the money. Like, obviously it's a lot of money. I would not like to spend that much now, but It was really a lot of stress, and I think, like, it comes up with, like, in my experience, deciding who to invite, and if you have any sort of awkwardness or tension or, estrangement in your family, that time heightens it. For me, I definitely felt this conflict of, like, this is what a wedding should look like that I've been told it should look like, and I've seen my friends do, but that doesn't sit right for me, or it brings up extra fears. And that was a huge stress of, like, deciding not to invite some people, or deciding to kind of go a little bit bigger because other people expect it. Um, Even like in the little things that creep up, like I know we had some family members asking about things I didn't even really think about, like, okay, well, you do need wedding favors, and you definitely need to have like extra drinks for people during their ceremony, and then you should do a really cute guest book. So, like, a lot of people do Instax photos instead of just literally writing your name with a note. And it was all these little things that, as we kind of talked about that inertia, where when people would suggest it, it kind of felt hard to say no when those people were like helping you with the wedding too. So my partner and I, like, funded the majority of it out of our, yeah, own funds, but we had a lot of time help and energy help. Um, and when people are giving that, I know I've heard this too from other friends. It feels hard to say no and to push back, even if it costs you more money. Um, but really that day, in like leading up to it, there was just, I feel like I kind of lost what I would want for me. And like, I actually remember talking with my spouse at the time, fiance, about it, where we felt like we were doing it for our family and friends by the time we got to it. Like, it was a party for them, and it felt less for us. Even actually, I'm just remembering this, even when it came to um the ceremony, we added in like some elements that would better fit expectations. For we have a lot of religious family. We're not very religious, but little nods to that. And I think there's just things I wouldn't do today. Like, I wouldn't have compromised as much. And I definitely feel like I know myself better, and I have far better boundaries when it comes to money and also saying no to people now than I did then. Um, and I just think yeah, if I were to do it today, it would be it would feel more like me and more like my spouse in all of the details, and there would be a lot less, we did this just because we're supposed to.
Totally. And when you talk to your wife now, first of all, does she feel the same way about, like, wow, I really regret a lot of this spending? And also, does she feel like she would like she learned things from her sort of the way that she navigated those boundaries and those expectations at the time? Because I feel like it's always so interesting the way that this is, like, again, so targeted to and put on the shoulders of the bride in the wedding. And I always wonder, did the then groom have like a similar experience and feel that same level of inertia and pressure?
We've we've definitely talked about it, and she agrees, like, there is regret around kind of the big thing. And I actually do remember when we were planning, she had mentioned, like, well, we could elope. And I was the one who felt probably like 60%, like, no, no, we should do the wedding, at the very, very beginning. And I think as we went through, there was more inertia from her perspective. I'm gonna speak from like her being the groom at the time. One of her like love languages is gift giving. So even getting caught up in like the groomsmen gifts and like what we could do, and like funding a lot of that, like giving um different like bow ties and suspenders and cufflinks or whatever, like all these little things, like getting excited about it, but losing the perspective of like, this is all for one day. Um, I think it was easy to get excited because it is still exciting. Like I still look back and we both look back on that day and we're like, that was a really fun day as a whole. Like we had, it's the only time our whole family has ever met, let alone like been together. So it's great to look back on, but it didn't need to have all of these extra elements. And we both do agree on that. Um, it certainly could have been, if not a third, a sixth of the cost to get the same, to have the same memory that we look back on. The only other thing I can think of is not even like specific to the groom experience, but just certain things that she like really cared about of the food and wanting the food to be a particular way and like have like specific things come across because that's something that we care about and she cared about was like the type of food. Um, but not anything else related to the groom experience. Yeah.
I just feel like that goes to show that there's like, for every one thing that we market to brides, or every 10 things rather, there's like maybe one that is marketed to grooms. And I feel like there's just so much of the experience. Like, I don't feel like, and it's funny too, because I noticed this about so many life events that we like very much hyper focus to women is like, just as an example, like I can name 10 women off the top of my head in my life who once they had a child, went from posting a lot on social media about themselves, about their interests, their career, their hobby, their education, to pretty much exclusively posting about their children. And I cannot name a single man that I know that has made that same sort of change from being very, I mean, often a lot of them just don't post at all, but the ones that do, it's pretty much not at all the case that they'll sort of suddenly start doing that. And kind of similarly, for all the women I know who've gotten married, I can name countless ones who have, been very involved in the planning process, who have been, very clearly given a narrative that this is the most important day of their life, that that there's all these expectations for, what they should look like, what they should do, what they should, provide for people. And almost no men, I think, who have had that same level of pressure or who have been given that same narrative. And for women who, brides who are going through it, who do feel like, I mean, even using the internet, like all of your targeted ads become wedding related, basically everything. And like, there's literally like a bridal version of absolutely everything you can think of. What are some sort of strategic pieces of advice that you would give them to lean out of, especially the stuff that's like very hyper targeted to women?
Maybe, oh man, targeted advice. I would say turn off social media, like anything related to it for a wedding as much as you can, avoid it. And like make a new account if you really want to use like Pinterest. Do not have it be your normal Pinterest account because it does just inundate the whole feed with everything related to wedding. And I think that does help build like the comparison thing. Um, that's kind of a silly one, but one, like I wish that I hadn't had so many just targeted ads and reminders or suggestions of like, oh, this could be a cool way to do this or that, or like I didn't like specific shoes instead of just like any other shoes I had. I also think just generally taking a step back and asking yourself why, like really like trying to fight yourself for any decisions you're making about we need to have this and this and this in our wedding. I'm not against like big weddings. I just think for me personally, looking back, there are certain things I bought or purchased like to have as a part of the theme and aesthetic of the wedding just because I saw other people doing it and I felt like, oh, that would be nice. And that's like what you need to make it feel like a wedding. And I think just if I had stopped and asked, do I want this more than is this what a wedding needs to be? That would have really helped me feel more authentic and also save money. But I think just asking and trying to not get caught up with people, maybe even at the beginning, just trying to make a contract with yourself about what you're willing, what you actually want then. And so you can kind of keep stopping yourself along the way and saying, is this aligning with my initial goals for what this day was going to look like. And if not, don't do it.
Well, on that note, one of the things that has completely spiraled out of control, and this is what we talked about in the first episode in the mini series, is just like the whole experience of being like in a bridal party, because so much of that, the bridal shower, the bachelorette, the dress, the shoes, the makeup, the hair, like it has just exploded in cost. Things were expected to do things now that didn't even exist 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Did you have a bridal party? Did you do a bachelorette? Did you do a bridal shower? Did they have to buy a dress? Like, what was your bridal party approach?
Yes, I did have a bridal party, and they all had to buy an outfit in a color scheme. So I had some just like androgynous friends that fit in, and I wanted everyone to feel comfortable. So I was like, here's a series of teals. Find something you would actually like to wear. So we had like jumpsuits and dresses and actual suits, but everyone did purchase that. I did have I did not require like hair or makeup. I have learned everyone has just different expectations of that. And I've been in bridal parties where that wasn't a requirement. I was like, it's cool, just show up. I did my own makeup. Um, did have a bachelorette, so I didn't like plan it. One of my friends kind of spearheaded planning, and just anyone from the bridal party who wanted to go went, and we were all coming from across the country, so they picked a place in the middle, and we went and had a weekend there. It wasn't anything crazy, but it was still, I paid for my flight through my friends, and meals, and I think I still spent 600. And I didn't pay for like accommodations. We all shared an Airbnb, and my friends like covered it. And as well as like one nice meal out and a massage. So there was still that, and like that's all that we had that was kind of related to the bridal party.
So, as many of you might know, I have been on a bit of a food spending and food habit journey this year. I spent the whole month of February cooking 100% of my meals at home from scratch. And while I'm definitely now doing a little bit of restaurants and delivery, it is nowhere near the scale I used to be doing it at. And given how much I've been changing my food habits, especially as it pertains to food shopping, it is perfect that right now we are partnering with Hungry Root. Hungry Root makes it super easy to eat healthy. They send you fresh, high-quality groceries and simple recipes to take the guesswork out of your meal planning and prepping. Take a short quiz and Hungry Root will get to know your personal health goals, what you like to eat, and more. Then they'll build you a personalized cart with all your grocery needs for the week and give you delicious recipe recommendations to put those groceries to use. Each order is fully customizable, so you can take their suggestions or, like me, choose other things that you might want. I did a combination of both. They've got fresh produce, high-quality meat and seafood, healthy snacks, smoothies, sweets, ready-to-eat meals, kids' snacks, vitamins, supplements, and more. Like I said, I personally did some of their suggested groceries based on meals that they curated, but I also swapped out some of the things for other ingredients that I've been wanting to try. Notably, I got this tandoori masala paneer that I turned into a really nice Indian chopped salad the other night, which you can see here. And tonight I'm going to be making drunken noodles with the rice noodles that I got from Hungry Root. That's true. Everything from Hungry Root follows a simple standard. It's got to taste good, be quick to make, and contain whole, trusted ingredients. Right now, Hungry Root is offering the Financial Confessions listeners 40% off your first delivery and free veggies for life. Go to hungryroot.com/TFC to get 40% off your first delivery and get your free veggies. That's hungryroot.com/TFC. Don't forget to use our link so they know that we sent you. I just want to take a second here to thank today's video sponsor, Delete Me. As someone who is very present on the internet and has been for basically my entire adult life, I know how important it is to protect certain information and how to use the internet wisely. As you know, all season long here on TFC, we've been chatting with relatable guests who have dealt with or are currently going through a wide range of personal and financial issues. While many of these hardships could never have been avoided due to circumstance, it's important to always remember to do what you can to protect yourself in situations that you do have control over. This is why I personally recommend and actually use Delete Me. I've been using Delete Me for months now, and they've provided me with detailed reports of all the places that my information, my personal, private information, has been showing up without my knowledge or consent all over the internet. Delete Me is a subscription service that removes your personal info from the largest people search databases on the web, and in the process helps prevent potential ID theft, doxing, and phishing scams. Delete Me finds and removes the personal information you don't want online and makes sure that it stays off. Sign up and provide Delete Me with exactly what information you want deleted, and their experts take it from there. Delete Me sends you regular personalized privacy reports showing what info they found, where they found it, and what they removed. Delete Me isn't just a one-time service. They're always working for you, constantly monitoring and removing the personal information you don't want on the internet. Take control of your data and keep your private life private by signing up for Delete Me, now at a special discount for our listeners. Today, get 20% off your Delete Me plan when you go to joindeleteme.com/TFC and use promo code TFC at checkout. The only way to get 20% off is to go to joindeleteme.com/TFC and enter code TFC at checkout. That's joindeleteme.com/TFC, code TFC. Is there any aspect of the bridal party bachelorette, anything that you would do differently now financially?
I don't think I would have a bridal party today, but I think that's because I just would want the whole wedding to be different today and not have, again, like, it feels like a lot of responsibility today. I actually had one friend um decide not to do it because it just felt like a lot of responsibility and like pressure to show up, and like I totally respect that and get that, and I think that takes away from just letting people enjoy celebrating, like, the wedding, like, the actual 2 people getting married and just have fun, and I think not financially, but emotionally, I would prefer to not have a bridal party.
Well, the last person that we interviewed said that she would definitely not have a bridal party after going into a lot of debt being a bridesmaid. And I think that's a more and more common refrain. I think, again, like, this entire concept has spiraled so far out of control. Like, when our parents' generation were getting married, like, if they had a couple bridesmaids, they literally just showed up on the day. They maybe like had one or two responsibilities. But now, I think most of us have been in a bridal party where, you're in a group chat with 10 other women you've never met, and you're all like planning, a girls' trip to Scottsdale or whatever. And you're like, I don't even know how I'm going to afford this. And even the fact that you made the trip optional and made that very clear of like, this is only an opt-in scenario, I think even that's like pretty rare. I think I think just a very prevalent pressure on people who are sort of part of it to not feel like they can opt out of any element of it.
I absolutely agree, and that was something that, my spouse and I both were trying to avoid, like, that feeling, one, of costing people a lot of money, and, they had a bachelor party where it was much more low cost, like, someone's family had a timeshare, and they were able to, like, hop in on that for one weekend and just chilled and, like, I don't know, just hung out, and I think, like, that sounds more fun and also so much less pressure than other types of trips that I've been on, but even, like, I know a lot of friends that have been on where it is this huge thing where you have to get a bunch of different outfits and go spend, like, $500 at least a day on different activities, a spa day, a going out night, a very nice resort dinner night, and just it escalating into this big, again, like, performance, and a lot of it's just, I don't know, for me, feeling like this pressure of you're doing it because you see other people do it on social media, and so you feel like that's what you're supposed to want to do, um, and I do hate that it adds so much pressure, and I did try to avoid that, and I still think it, like, came up, and if that's someone who tried to make it as chill as they could at the time, again, would do it differently now, but it still caused, like, some pressure, and I think that, I don't know, that just sucks, like, I don't wanna put that on friends, and I didn't love it when it was put on me, and I hope that it can change.
I mean, you said in your email that going back, you wish you had eloped. And it's funny, like, I've heard a lot of people in my years doing this say that they regret money that they spent on their wedding. I've never once heard someone say that they regretted eloping.
Nope. I also have some friends that have eloped, and some that have done, like, big parties, like, later, and they're like, "Yeah, that was the best decision. I'm so glad that I didn't have all of that extra stuff on the day I was getting married.
Well, that's the thing that I think not enough people really understand is like just by dint of it being a wedding or related to anything bridal, you're already having a huge markup on things that would otherwise not cost as much. Like there very much is a wedding tax. And like even for the same services, or the same products, like you'll be charged a serious upcharge for the fact that it's a wedding as opposed to any other party of the same size. And listen, I've heard a lot of people try to justify that. I've yet to ever be convinced that it's actually worth the extra money that's being charged. I think it's mostly just benefiting from a situation where women, again, especially, are under an enormous amount of pressure and are also spending a huge amount of money that they may already not be comfortable with. So they're just like more likely to rubber stamp things than they otherwise would be. But just by separating out the ceremony from then let's just throw a party with their friends, you're already likely going to save so much money just by not having that party explicitly be a wedding.
Very much so. Yes.
And there's also just way less pressure to do things any specific way other than the way that you want to do them. And to your point, I mean, I would be curious, you know, I had a 30-person wedding and we were together for a week, so we did get a lot of quality time. And I've also been to weddings that were very, very large where clearly no one was getting any quality time. There were like 200 plus people there. How do you even manage that? With 80 people, do you feel like that was a number where you were able to get the quality time you wanted with the people who came to your wedding? Or how do you feel about 80 people, regardless of cost?
No. On the actual day, no. I didn't even get to talk to everybody. Like it when it actually hit because of the way of the format of a wedding, I got to talk to my bridal party a lot and then my family a lot in the day before and the morning of. But once setting up for ceremony starts at like, I think we started at 4. It went so fast and we really only had, I think, 4 hours of actually like socializing with the 80 people. And some people like this concept of time just really does not exist in that moment. And so suddenly you realize, oh, you didn't really get to talk with certain people other than like a quick, like, hi, thank you for coming. Great to see you. Um, and I, I think that's like quite sad. Honestly, looking back, I wish that I had been able to just talk to people more, at least like 5 minutes a person. I wasn't even able to accomplish that because, and I guess this is just coming back to like the setup of a wedding, like the dancing, the speeches, the this and that you typically lay out, um, doesn't really allow for actual one-on-one time with people, especially when there's 80. And I think 30 definitely sounds more doable.
I think it's less so the number and more that we were just together for a week. And I think the other thing about that too was that like by the time it was over, I was like, get me the hell out of here. Like I am done with this. No shade to anyone there, but it's stressful. Like and I think at least having that amount of time where you feel like you really appreciate and you got to enjoy it thoroughly, as opposed to, I mean, even attending weddings or being in a wedding, to your point about the way time passes, I think because it's all so hyped up and you spend oftentimes a year planning and perfecting and inviting and prepping and tailoring and buying, you don't realize that what you're actually talking about is a matter of hours and it goes by incredibly quickly. And I've spoken to a lot of even, good friends of mine who have said they felt kind of like a mini depression after the wedding was over because it was so fast and they feel like, they put in all of this work for something that they barely really even have the time to enjoy. Because the other thing is, especially when you're the bride or you're in the bridal party, you're being pulled in all directions constantly. You're taking photos, you're having to run around from table to table. Like, I think for any other circumstance, the way we think about how we spend and what we consider being worth spending on, and there's all the talk about spend on experiences, not things. It's like it gets totally lost in wedding culture that what you're actually talking about for this entire year of prep is just a couple hours on a dance floor.
Yes, I entirely agree. And I think honestly, it would have been so much more, I think, fulfilling and meaningful if even the same funds we put into the day were spent on, the smaller party of truly like immediate friends and family we wanted at like a vacation house. Instead, just having fun being together and having one of the days be okay, we just we have an officiant and we get married and then we just hang out. Um, it is a lot of money and time, so much time, as you mentioned, in planning and thinking and making all these different decisions and debating, and they ultimately really don't matter. Like, all these different aesthetic things really don't matter. And most of them aren't even in the photos. Like, the photos are up close of you and of like people partying, and not the ribbon color you chose to go on specific like tables or in certain like party favors. It's just really fleeting.
Well, I made a TikTok a while ago about my own wedding and stuff, and the thing I said up front that I like that a lot of people like called out and were like very true, and I didn't even really think of it at the time, but the more I thought about it, the more I'm like, we need to send this message far and wide, especially again to brides, is like literally none of this matters. Literally not a single thing that you're being targeted with advertisements about, that people are pressuring you about, that you're seeing on Instagram, that like the food, the venue, the music, the like whatever, like it's just a party. Literally none of that matters. And the only thing that actually matters is this incredibly consequential legal arrangement that you're entering into with another person. And it's so wild to me that we put such a heavy focus on all of these completely arbitrary, inconsequential aspects of a party. And yet there's almost no focus on the fact that what you're effectively doing is like entering a lifelong legal arrangement with someone. And that's the only part of it that actually matters.
That's the only lasting part, really. Absolutely agree. Like, again, I really cannot remember the details. And when I was going back and adding up all the line items to come up with like, what did I actually spend? Because I certainly did not go back and do that immediately after getting married. Um, I forgot about a lot of things that we even did. And again, like, they weren't documented in a photograph. It was just, I paid for the certain thing just to make an event happen. And it really didn't, so much of it didn't matter. It's just, yeah, now I've been 5 years in a partnership with my best friend, and we've gone through a lot of life together, and like, that's the lasting thing. And I have a wedding dress still that sits in a closet.
That's the part that really kills me is like, people spending thousands of dollars on a dress, first of all, let me be very, very clear. We are in a golden era of renting clothing. Why in the world are we still paying $2,000+ to rent a dress? You think you will say to yourself, and I'm just gonna, you know what, whatever, I am gonna flex. My wedding dress was $80. So let's start there. But even that, I never wore that again. And people will gaslight themselves all the live long day about, I'm gonna wear this again. People are like, I'm going to turn it into a midi dress and like dip dye it. I have never once, not once in my whole life, have I seen someone actually repurpose their wedding dress for another thing. Like, if the goal, but they will tell you when you are at those expensive bridal stores, they will sell you they will weave a yarn about all the things you're going to do with this this wedding dress to justify spending thousands of dollars on it. And the crazy part to me is like, if you really want A, let's rent that thing. But B, if you insist on buying it and you actually want to wear it again, literally the last thing you would want to buy is something that's very visibly a wedding dress, because that's like basically you can't even wear it to another wedding because then you're wearing a wedding dress. Like, at that point, just buy like a skirt suit, go the Carrie Bradshaw route and wear something that you could like wear to work or something.
Oh, yes. No, I have a princess dress in a closet that literally I'm never gonna wear again. And if I think I'm over the hope of like, well, maybe if I do have offspring one day, they'll want it. No, they won't. Like, It's
Oh,
gonna be so different then.
that's the other thing is like, I know so many people whose mothers saved their own wedding dresses and they were like, it's for your wedding. And then their millennial or Gen Z or whatever daughter is like, Mom, I'm going to hold your hand when I say this. I love you, but I have no desire to wear your 1984 like Princess Diana dress. That looks like you're being like suffocated in taffeta or whatever. Or, listen, boomer moms love to tell you how thin they were on their wedding day, too. A lot of those dresses aren't necessarily going to fit, and it's pretty presumptuous to assume that you're going to be the exact same body type as your future child.
Yes. Yes. And then all the alterations are also incredibly expensive on a wedding dress.
Yes.
I did not realize that. I kind of mentioned at the beginning, but I thought I was being very smart in how I got around saving money on my like very nice designer wedding dress because I used a service where they took my exact measurements and I was able to work with designers to design it in the sense of like picking out the fabric and the shape and then where the lace was placed. And it still didn't fit exactly how it was supposed to. And I spent 500 to hem it appropriately, adjust like all the different measurements of the bust and like a bustle, which didn't really even realize that was a thing. And it just like it's not upfront cost. Again, it's like these costs that come up along the way that no one's very clear about.
No one warns you. I will say also, I have a conspiracy theory. I bet you if you had taken a dress of the exact same proportions, but that was not visibly a wedding dress or denoted as a wedding dress, you probably would have paid less for the alterations because I got my wedding dress altered. It wasn't white, so I don't even necessarily think. Well, they did know it was a wedding dress because my dumbass walked into the tailor and was like, "This is my wedding dress." And I'm sure they had like the cartoon dollars in their eyes, like, "Can't wait to charge this bitch 4 times almost what I paid for the actual dress itself in alterations to get it to fit me perfectly." I mean, it was an $80 dress, so whatever, but hundreds of dollars in alterations. And I have subsequently gotten way more elaborate alterations on other clothing that was not a wedding dress, and it was way less money. So I'm thinking they also probably put the wedding tax on the fact that it's like the most important dress you'll ever wear. And even like silly things like that, like it's funny to me how many people think, for example, that they need to wear a white dress on their wedding, even if, white is not their color or they would never normally want a white dress. It's just, I really think there is sort of like a collective mental unwellness that falls over people where they just lose the ability to step back from something and say, wait, do I actually even want this?
Entirely. Absolutely. That is like the whole lesson learned from me of that experience is how easy it is to get caught up, especially in something that's supposed to be such a grand experience and everyone's telling you it's the best day of your life, it's the most important day. It's hard to not get caught up in it and ask like, is this even something I want actually?
Well, out of curiosity, did you go on a honeymoon?
I did.
Because that's the other place they'll gouge the hell out of you is on a honeymoon. Where did you go? What did you spend roughly?
I am unsure what I spent, but I can try to think back. We went to Italy for a week and then France for a week. And within that we went to Rome for like 2 days, Florence for 4, Bordeaux for 4, and then I think Paris for 4. So about 2 weeks.
Classic. Did you go right after your wedding?
Yes, and that's a huge regret. I actually have a lot of regrets about the trip. I loved the trip. Should not have gone right after because we were exhausted. We
Yeah.
were so tired. And doing a trip like that, I actually remember before we did it, I was like, I don't get why people just go to like the beach. Like, don't you want to go to like a really fun thing? No, you want to go lay at the beach and do nothing. And I understand why people go to Hawaii or Mexico right after they get married because they just want to sleep for a week. And yeah, we both agree like we should have done that. The trip itself was great. It just should not have been our honeymoon.
Um, Yes, I totally agree with that. I actually don't think I've ever technically had a honeymoon, which I look forward to lording over my husband's head for the rest of our lives. Because anytime he doesn't want to do it, travel, I'm like, well, we've never had a honeymoon. So, I mean, this is it. But I totally agree with you that it just really, I don't think people necessarily think to themselves how tired they're going to be after a year of leading up to it and the actual ceremony itself, and how little they're probably going to want to go. Because, like, especially if you're doing 4 European cities back to back, like, that Google Doc is packed with like activities and itineraries and flights and, train travel. Um, but again, I think it all comes down to this like cultural perception we have of like, this is what you're supposed to do. This is when you're supposed to do it. And there's just no ability to step back and be like, but is this even the right time?
No, no, I totally agree. I I guess another piece of advice to literally everyone would be just at least wait a weekend, but honestly do I know they became, what is it? A later moon is I think like the term for just waiting 6 months or even a year after the actual wedding to do the honeymoon trip.
Well, I've heard a lot of people say that. And I think, especially since the pandemic, that has become popular because for a lot of people, they didn't have the choice. So I definitely think that. I've also heard, and I would love, sound off in the comments, y'all, if you have a kid. But like having not had a child, I can't speak personally, but I've heard a lot of women say that they regretted doing a baby moon while they were pregnant, and would have vastly preferred like couples trip after having the kid and after, they're like out of like the immediate newborn phase. Because I mean, basically for a lot of people, like depending on where you are in your pregnancy, depending on like how, physically you're doing, like I've seen a lot of women who have gone on them like fairly late in the pregnancy, and they're like, I literally can barely walk around. Like I can barely enjoy this trip. I feel horrible. I like am nauseous. I'm like, it's just not a time that you necessarily want to be going on a romantic couples trip. But because there has been really effective marketing around the concept of a baby moon, which happens during the pregnancy, now it's like, well, that's when you do it.
Didn't even think about that. Wow. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm not having kids, but you will not be catching me if I ever do, out to here waddling around, Lisbon or wherever people are going. No, thank you.
Yeah, same exact logic of just because everyone's saying to do it. Do you really want that? I haven't been pregnant. Can't imagine that would feel good because I have had friends that have done it when they're 6 months pregnant, and I don't think that they would have enjoyed it as much as if they had waited.
I'm supposed to go on a walk with my pregnant friend, and she was like, "Yeah, just we have to go somewhere with a lot of coffee shops because I never know if I'm gonna be able to walk for long periods of time right now." And I'm like, could you imagine? You're like literally on an airplane like that. Anyway, as a rapid fire kind of last thought, what are the specific purchases looking back at your wedding, like specific items, specific services, whatever, that you were like, regardless of what the shape may take now, that would be a hard no. I would never spend on that again.
I mean, the very first one that popped to mind was videography because we've watched that video twice, I think. Like, not including when we first got it in the 5 years, we've seen it twice. That was not worth $3,300 for us. So that would definitely be a no.
3,300, girl, you got. That is so much money.
All I can say is we got married in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I think in general, everything was more expensive there.
That's true. But also, everyone at home, if you're debating, as someone who has the Greek mythology level punishment of having to see herself on 4K camera on an everyday basis, it's nice to just have like sort of blurry images of ourselves. Pictures are nice. You can project on them, you can reflect on them, you can, pull them up to look at. You don't need a 4K, high def vision of whatever was happening that day. Let your imagination run wild, I say.
Entirely agree. And I do think photography was great. I
Yes.
don't regret that. But yeah, I would say videography. Um, honestly, flowers in general, like didn't really add that much. We got married outside anyways. Um,
Oh, can I make a recommendation on that note? My friend who I was in her bridal party, she did a service where you rent really beautiful fake flowers for the day, and they're like silk. They were absolutely stunning. She did them for all of her florals. It was an absolute fraction of the price and not wasteful because they get used a bazillion times.
I love that. That's a great tip. Um, I would say those are the top things that like actually would make sense, but a lot of the other ones are like venue related. But I would also mention, if not like a rapid fire like question there, but tip is think about tips too when it comes to budget, because that's a whole other field of like there's not a clear-cut answer to how tipping works in the wedding industry. And that was a large chunk of the budget as well. And I'm not going to say I regret that because people deserve to be paid well and compensated well, but it was a huge part of the budget.
Yes, and this is one of my pet peeves that I relish the opportunity to complain about. If you are having a wedding, if you are having an event, if you are doing anything with bar service where there's like bartenders who are making drinks, this is usually does not happen with food service, but it happens with bartending. You tip those bartenders handsomely. It's already covered, it's already paid for, and they do not put tip jars out on the bar. It is not fair. It puts the guests in an awkward position because if you didn't carry cash, you can't tip the bartenders and you don't know now whether or not you're like completely stiffing them. I also feel that in any kind of like party scenario, you should not have people breaking out their wallets in any case, like once they're a guest. But especially with those bartenders, it's not fair to them because then they have to rely willy-nilly on whatever cash people happen to have on hand. And it's not fair to your guests. Tip them well and tip them ahead of time so that that does not happen. That is my spiel.
Agreed. Entirely. Tip people well. But also anticipate tipping all of your service folk, including like your DJ. It's honestly hard to say any more line items because it just kind of goes into, I wouldn't do that party again the way that I did it, all of the above. I can say the things I would do again is having a good DJ. And that it goes for any party, and that could be your Spotify playlist, but having music that you actually like.
Spotify playlist, but do get someone to man it because I was once at a wedding where there was just an iPhone plugged into a speaker and it kept a playlist. It was just like songs being picked. And so there kept being just like song played, silence, running over to the iPhone, next song, silence. At least curate the playlist ahead of time.
Fair, definitely fair.
Well, listen, I think it is a very, very important message to share that even while having as much DIY and comp stuff as you did, you still spent an absurd amount of money looking back that you regret, and you would totally elope now, and you think that you could have spent half or less and still been just as happy. I think that's a great parting message for our guests at home. I assume because we're doing first name only, there's nothing you want to promote or direct people to?
No, just a regular human saying don't do it.
Create fake social media accounts so you can contain all the wedding nonsense to a contained area. I think that's a great tip. And just remember, none of this matters. It's just a party.
It's just a party.
Also, I gave this tip and I got yelled at by a wedding industry professional, but I'm giving it again. You do not have to disclose to people that you are having a wedding. There are a few things that it really is like you have to disclose, but for the rest of it, you're just having a party. Don't let them upcharge you.
Just a party.
Just a party. Just a degular party. If people happen to exchange vows, I don't know about that. Can't confirm or deny.
That happens at events and parties. People speak. Sometimes they make a little speech about something.
People give toasts. Maybe just two people give a toast looking directly into each other's eyes. Okay. Thank you so much, Liz, for joining and sharing your story. It's been delightful to speak with you. And thank you all at home for tuning in. And I will see you back here next Wednesday on an all-new episode of The Financial Confessions. Bye, guys. Thank you so much for joining us, and be sure to tune in next week for an all-new episode of The Financial Confessions. The Financial Confessions is created by The Financial Diet and hosted by me, Chelsea Fagan. It is produced by Alexa Brooks Major and Holly Trantham. Recording and editing by Emily Fisher, and music and sound effects are from Epidemic Sound. Want more of our content? Head over to our YouTube page, The Financial Diet, to see our monthly deep dives, videos of this show, and our entire backlog of videos and podcasts. I'll talk to you next week.